At 72, I found myself a widow living in solitude. My only companion had been my cat, Tom, and after his passing, the silence in my home became overwhelming. My daughter, Sarah, suggested I consider a pet to alleviate my loneliness, and eventually, I chose to adopt a dog. I brought Charlie home from the shelter, not realizing the profound friendship that would blossom. Initially, he was simply a dog, albeit an exceptionally attentive one. Charlie seemed to sense my moods. He would nudge my hand with his cool nose and wag his tail to lift my spirits. I often found myself talking to him, a habit many would consider normal when there's no one else around. Over time, our bond deepened into something I never anticipated. I vividly recall one particular night, a night that marked a shift within me. I was seated on the couch, lost in thoughts of Tom. It was the anniversary of Tom's passing, and I was weary from tears. Charlie sat beside me, but this evening was different. He climbed onto the couch and rested his head on my lap. His gaze met mine, seemingly absorbing the weight of my sorrow. As if he truly understood, I murmured, "You're a good boy, Charlie," while gently stroking his soft ears. His presence eased my heartache. It felt as though he was the only one who comprehended my pain. The way he looked at me wasn't merely that of a pet to its owner. It was more profound, an emotion that felt almost human. This connection grew over the months, and Charlie ceased being just a pet to me. Each morning, I awoke to find him at the foot of my bed, where Tom once slept. This new routine became something I cherished and eagerly anticipated. Even on quiet nights, the comfort of his warm body beside me brought its own solace. It wasn't just his warmth that changed things, it was his constant presence. He began shadowing me everywhere, watching me intently, a behavior that initially unsettled me. His eyes seemed to follow my every move with unwavering anticipation. Before long, I realized an indescribable connection had formed between us. It was a mystery to me at the time. One particular evening stood out. It was late, and the house was still. I had just finished my tea and was preparing for bed when Charlie bounded into the room, as he often did. However, this time, he didn't settle at the foot of the bed. Instead, he sat beside me. His deep, dark eyes pierced into mine. A peculiar flutter stirred within my chest. "Charlie, what are you doing?" I asked softly, attempting to lighten the sudden tension. Yet, he remained unmoved. He continued to gaze at me, his eyes filled with an intensity that both intrigued and unsettled me. My heart raced, yet I couldn't look away. It felt absurd. In that moment, I could have sworn I saw something extraordinary. It was beyond the ordinary. I felt confused as Charlie nestled closer to my side. He rested his head on my hip and wagged his tail gently. There was an unspoken connection, and I found myself reaching out to stroke him. My fingers quivered slightly. It was then I realized the warmth of a bond one hadn't felt in years. Not since that night with Tom had things been so profoundly different. Charlie's attachment to me grew stronger with each passing day. Wherever I went, he was there, watching, waiting, always seeking to be near. The night we shared that close contact, he drew even nearer. His presence was comforting, yes, but there was an underlying discomfort I couldn't quite shake. At first, I struggled to acknowledge it. I recall waking one night, bathed in moonlight casting shadows across the room, and there was Charlie, nestled beside me. His face was so near I could feel his breath, causing me to pause. As I reached out to stroke his fur, a wave of warmth enveloped me. He responded by snuggling closer, and in that half-asleep state, vulnerability took hold. An undeniable awareness dawned on me, our connection was deepening in ways I couldn't easily rationalize. I tried dismissing it, attributing it to loneliness playing tricks on my mind. After all, I was an elderly woman who had lost her lifelong companion. Was it wrong to find solace in a dog? Yet, the feelings intensified. Charlie seemed attuned to it as well. He shadowed me everywhere. Always by my side, his eyes never strayed from me. It felt as though an unseen force was binding us beyond ordinary friendship. It was bewildering, yet undeniable. I needed him more than I cared to admit. Then came the night that altered everything. Restless and unable to sleep, my thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind, and I couldn't shake the sensation that something was evolving between us. I ventured downstairs, hoping a glass of water would soothe my nerves, but upon returning to the bedroom, Charlie was already there, occupying my side of the bed. As I approached, he remained still, not even blinking, simply waiting for me. I hesitated but eventually slipped into bed. As I settled under the covers, Charlie moved closer. His body pressed against mine, offering a peculiar comfort. My mind, like constellations descending into a dark world, should have recoiled, for nature seemed momentarily altered. Yet, I allowed him to stay. We quietly absorbed each other's warmth. My heart filled voids that had been empty for so long, yet I felt no shame. As we lay there, I experienced a tranquility unlike any since Tom's passing. It felt wrong, perhaps. But in another sense, it was undeniably right, in a way I couldn't articulate. We spent a long time there in the darkness. There was no urgency to rise. In the days that followed, a tumultuous mix of confusion and guilt enveloped me. This evolving relationship with Charlie was perplexing. Yet, I couldn't pull away. I needed him more than I'd realized. The depth of the void within me had been greater than I knew. But as weeks passed, clarity emerged. This unusual emotional entanglement with my canine companion wasn't healthy. I was dissatisfied with life. And I was particularly troubled by the lack of control. I found myself in an unimaginable situation. The first step was to stop. Confronting reality, I realized I was seeking from Charlie what I should have sought from people, family, and friends. Admitting this was difficult. But the truth became clear. I had to sever this toxic bond before it deepened. Charlie was a wonderful, loyal dog. Yet, he couldn't fill the void left by Tom, so I began to withdraw. I spent more time with Sarah and my grandchildren, reconnecting with the human relationships I had neglected. I reconnected with old friends and rediscovered activities that once brought me joy. Charlie remained a constant presence in my life. He was always by my side, but I consciously established the boundaries I needed. I reminded myself that he was, after all, just a dog. He was my loyal companion, but not a substitute for human connection. Reflecting on this, I realized how easily loneliness can lead one into unexpected, even decadent, emotional territories. I had allowed my grief to cloud my judgment. This led to an unhealthy attachment, but eventually, I found my way back and learned to lean on those who truly cared for me. Most importantly, I understood that, despite my affection for Charlie, he could never fulfill my need for human interaction. Now, in my quiet home, Charlie lies at my feet, as he always does. I wish I could say that everything returned to normal after I decided to redefine my relationship with Charlie. But the truth is, the journey back was long and arduous. Some evenings, when the silence felt overwhelming, I found myself doubting and seeking comfort in Charlie. Old habits die hard, after all. Each day, I reminded myself that this was an unhealthy dynamic, detrimental to both of us. He was a dog, offering unconditional love. But he couldn't replace the human connections I craved. I began seeking more opportunities to engage with people. My daughter Sarah was the first to notice this change. During a tea visit one afternoon, she remarked, "Mom, you've been visiting more often these days." There was a warmth in her voice that I hadn't heard in years. I realized my withdrawal had also left a void for them. "I just don't want to be alone so much," I admitted, though I wasn't ready to share the peculiar bond one had formed with Charlie. How could I? I felt ashamed, and Sarah was always practical. She couldn't possibly grasp the depth of my loneliness. Smiling, she reassured me, "We're always here for you, Mom. You know that." Her words brought comfort but also regret. Why hadn't I reached out sooner? Why had I let my grief and isolation push me towards such a strange emotional reliance on a dog rather than my own family? I made a concerted effort to reconnect with the world beyond my little home. I resumed reading, something I hadn't done in ages, and joined a local book club. It was challenging to sit and chat with other women. They spoke of children and grandchildren, their lives bustling with people. I felt out of place. Years of solitude had eroded my social skills. But slowly, I began to enjoy their company. We discussed novels over tea, laughed at plots, and characters that reminded us of people we knew. It felt wonderful to laugh again, to feel that long-lost lightness in my heart. Charlie remained my steadfast friend. But I became more mindful of the boundaries I needed to maintain. No longer did I allow him to sleep in my bed. It was a habit I had to break. Instead, on my darkest days, I would gently pat his head before bed, and he would settle into his cozy spot at my feet. Initially, it was difficult to resist the urge to pull him close and let his warmth comfort me as it once did. But I knew I had to be steadfast. As the months passed, I began to notice changes within myself. While I suspected there would always be a place for Tom in my heart, the loneliness that once weighed so heavily no longer drove me to seek solace in Charlie. Slowly, I was learning that pain and emptiness are universal experiences, but they do not define who I am. I had friends, people I could reach out to, and I had Charlie. Yet, despite his boundless affection, it wasn't the kind of love I truly yearned for. On a bright autumn afternoon, roughly a year after the peculiar turning point with Charlie, I realized I had reached a significant milestone. I went for a stroll in the park, with Charlie happily trotting beside me. The air was crisp. Leaves danced in the breeze, and the scent of pine filled the air. As I glanced around, I noticed others walking their dogs. They laughed and chatted, and I was pleasantly surprised to see some familiar faces. It was remarkably easy to appreciate the companionship of both humans and animals as Charlie paused to sniff the fallen leaves. His tail wagged contentedly, and I smiled at him. "You're a good dog," I murmured, scratching his ears. He gazed up at me with his warm brown eyes, filled with the same love and loyalty he had always shown. But now I understood it for what it was: pure, simple, and unconditional. Still, it wasn't enough to fill the void that only human relationships could address. In the months that followed, I opened up more. I let my family in, sharing the struggles I faced and confronting the loneliness that had engulfed me after Tom's passing. I even hinted to Sarah, in a roundabout way, about how much I had come to rely on Charlie. She listened quietly, her expression full of understanding, and when I finished, she embraced me tightly. "Mom," she said softly, "we're always here." For the first time in a long while, I believed her. I realized I didn't have to navigate this journey alone. There were people who loved me and wanted to help me heal, and while Charlie was an essential part of this journey, he couldn't be my entire world. He was my dog, my steadfast friend, but I needed to start trusting those around me again. Reflecting on it all, I saw how loneliness could lead one into unusual circumstances, forming bonds that might seem perplexing to others. Yet, ultimately, what truly matters are the connections with people, the care and support from family and friends. Charlie would always hold a special place in my heart, but I was beginning to embrace the world beyond my quiet home once more. Here we are, Charlie. He lies at my feet. I feel a sense of peace, a natural calm. And this signifies that I am reconnecting with the source of my pain and welcoming those closest to me back into my life. After all, it's the bonds with people that ultimately mend our hearts. Temporary solace can never fully replace the healing power of human connection, no matter how loyal a dog may be.